cybersecurity is not a technical problem. Cybersecurity doesn't get fixed by buying firewalls, IDSs, and IPSs. If that was true, every organization would be secure. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You know what time it is. It's time for Life of a CISO with yours truly. The doctor is in the house. How is everyone doing today? I hope you are doing awesome. For those of you that are new, welcome, welcome, welcome. I just have one question for you. Where have you been? What have took you so long? I think we're on episode 100 plus on this amazing podcast, YouTube series. For those that are repeat listeners, thank you. Thank you for entrusting me with your time, and I hope you always get value out of all the content. As you know, one of my specialties that makes me so good at cybersecurity is I'm really good at looking for patterns, looking at data sets and saying, okay, what is the pattern that's going on here? What is the commonality across all these data sets that are the same? And the reason I like doing that is because if you can find patterns, you can fix root cause problems and secure computers very, very quick. And that's one of the reasons I was so good at a professional hacker, right, with cybersecurity, because I was able to look at systems, look at a very complex environment, and very quickly be able to see the patterns of, okay, here's a trend, here's issues, here's vulnerabilities. Simple example is with a lot of companies, I can go in and say, okay, you have a problem with configuration management, more specifically, updating operating systems. You have outdated operating systems no longer supported, have known vulnerabilities. So therefore, what we need to do is put a better system in place that as soon as a vendor announces an EOL end of life, we put a process in place because clearly your team is too slow and you end up being in a vulnerable position that basically you don't need to be in. Just a simple example. Now, I not only hack computers, I joke I hack people, right? With my coaching that I love so dearly of coaching CISOs and world-class security engineers, I'm always going in and looking at what are patterns where people are struggling? What are patterns in which everybody is having the same exact issue? And you know, I always like my stories or my quotes. So we'll start off this episode with a quote or story from the movie Bad Boys for Life. Right? There's a scene where Will Smith is sitting on the bleachers with his captain, and the captain watching his daughter's basketball game, and the captain says, "Let me tell you a story." And he goes, "There's this monk who's walking up the mountain, and it's a fairly narrow path up the mountain. And as he's walking up the mountain, he sees in front of him another person on a horse, and they're just riding really fast and really wild and all over the place. And the monk has to jump out of the way so he doesn't get run over. And as they fly by, the monk screams out, 'Where are you going?' And the person on the horse says, 'I don't know. Ask the horse.'" And that might sound like a strange story, so let me explain. The horse represents all of our fears, all of our concerns, all of our limiting beliefs about who we think we are and where we think we should go. And so many of us are letting that horse, right, letting those fears and beliefs guide and direct us instead of getting off the horse and go, wait a second, I'm in control here. So first question is, what are things, fears, concerns, beliefs? I call them limiting beliefs because positive beliefs are good. It's the limiting ones we don't like. What are all those things that are currently holding you back in your career? Just imagine for a second, is there something that you want to do that you're not doing? And if it is, ask, what is holding me back? I go in and I ask this question all the time of my coaching clients. When was the last time you talked with the CEO? Oh, Eric, we meet twice a year. Excellent. That's not what I asked. So let's try this again. I didn't ask, when do you have formal meetings with your CEO? I said, when do you talk? When was the last time you just swung by their office and you just popped your head and say, hey, you got a couple minutes? I just want to run some things by you. Or the CEO walks by your office. Hey, can we chat for a few minutes? I'm just curious, when was the last time that happened? And I think you know where I'm going, and the answer is typically zero. I'm like, so let me get this straight. You never, ever just talk or have conversations with your CEO. Don't you think that's important? If they're a chief officer and you're a chief officer and you both need to work together for the success of the overall business, don't you think a healthy relationship would be one in which you communicate more than a formal meeting every 6 months? I'm just asking, right? Wouldn't that make a lot of sense? And they're like, yes, but. And I always wait for the but, because that's going to tell me where the problem is. But, Eric, they don't want to talk to me. Here's what I love doing, and I love to coach you, but what I do with these free podcasts is I actually show you how you can coach yourself. So that's sort of the cool part about this, is ask yourself, is that really true? That's really what I do with my coaching, is I ask questions and then I do what I call pulling on the string. So I'm like, I'm going to pull on that string for a minute. Give me some factual data that that's true. Oh, but Eric, they don't want to, and you just start hearing, and I'm like, no. You have no idea whether that's true or not. And the reality is, if you were, and don't get mad at me, if you were truly a CISO that focused on the business and spoke business, they not only want to talk to you, they not only need to talk to you, they enjoy talking to you. Because I talk to CEOs and I go in and say, why don't you talk to your CISO on a regular basis? Why don't you swing by their office and just say hi? Or when was the last time they swung by and they go, oh, Eric, they never, ever come by my office to talk. And whenever I try to go by their office, they're always too busy to talk. So their impression is that you don't want to talk to them, which is not a good situation to be in. So I always tell them, okay, here's what I want you to do. Twice a week, Tuesday, Thursday, you pick a time. Pick breakfast, like coffee time or lunch, and just swing by their office around 8 a.m. or 11:30. Just say, hey, let's just go and grab a cup of coffee. You want to grab a cup? Or, hey, I was wondering if you maybe want to grab lunch today. And just do it every day. Now, you're doing this spontaneously. So be fair. There is a potential that they are busy. There's a potential that they go in and say, hey, I can't do it today. I'm busy, but how about next week? Or how about Thursday? And then you reschedule it. But the point is, when I go in and tell people to do that exercise, their response is, I can't do that. Well, why not? Why can't you? If you are truly, are you lying to me? Are you not the CISO? Because if you're the chief officer, you're probably one of five. One of five people in the entire organization whose title begins with a C and ends with an O. There's only five. There might be four, there might be six, but there's not 100. So how can you say, if you're one of five, that they're not going to want to talk to you? Of course they will. But you have a fear or a belief or a misconception that they don't, and therefore you never try. And because people don't try is the number one reason why they're being held back. Now, I continue to pull on this string of, why don't you think they want to talk to you? Why don't you want to talk to them? And where it almost always ends up is some variation where the root cause comes down to, but Eric, I am focused on a technical problem and the executives don't care about technology. I agree with the second part, but this is where we're going on this podcast. This is, to me, the biggest roadblock, the biggest issue, the biggest problem that CISOs have. So we're going to have a breakthrough moment. We're going to have a breakthrough moment on this podcast, and we're going to even have a drop the mic moment. So here we go. The drop the mic moment. Cybersecurity is not a technical problem. It is a business problem. Cybersecurity is not a technical problem. Cybersecurity doesn't get fixed by buying firewalls, IDSs, and IPSs. If that was true, every organization would be secure. If cybersecurity was a technical problem, cybersecurity would be solved. But this is why we struggle. This is why in cybersecurity, executives are so frustrated because they're like, we keep spending money. We keep buying stuff. And why isn't it fixing the problem? It's because it's not a technical problem. Now let's contrast. IT. IT is a technical problem. And because companies had IT and CIOs before they had cybersecurity and CISOs, they just think that a CISO and cyber is just like IT and CIOs. And that is the biggest fundamental problem. IT is a technical problem. And if you don't believe me, look at the metric. If you're a CIO, what is your metric? Uptime availability. If you're a CIO, what is your typical metric? Your typical metric's going to be 5 nines. 99.999% uptime availability. That is what you have to deliver, which means if the packets are flowing and the servers are cranking, you're doing good. Purely technical, and IT is solved by buying stuff. If you have the proper routers, switches, servers, and you have the proper redundancy in place, then you can technically solve your IT problem with technology. If you're a CIO, you don't need to talk to your execs weekly or monthly. If you're doing your job, which is mainly technical, and you're exceeding the metrics of 5 nines, great. You can walk by and fist pump, right? High five, but there's really not a lot to talk about. You're delivering what you need to deliver, and you are delivering the technology that's needed to run the business. Easy and simple. Cybersecurity is not that. It is a business problem. It's a business function. Cybersecurity is much more complex. Remember, our definition of cybersecurity: understanding, managing, and mitigating the risk of your critical data being disclosed, altered, or denied access. That sounds a lot more than a technical problem. And it is. Once again, cybersecurity is all about understanding, managing, and mitigating the risk of your critical data being disclosed, altered, or denied access. It's all about risk management, which means we are constantly having to evaluate the risk. We're constantly having to look at what are the current risks today, what is the value and benefit, and is this risk worth it? And because your risk posture is always changing, why? Well, let's drill down. What is risk? Threat times vulnerability. Threats are the potential for harm. Threats are what cyber criminals and cyber adversaries are going to do against your organization. Well, isn't that always changing? Yes, right? How they attack, how they operate, how they go after organizations, that's constantly changing. Right? We saw a ransomware. Last year was a big, then we're seeing extortion, then we're seeing drive-by. I mean, it's always changing. You don't control that. It's like the weather. So you need to go in and constantly be the weather person. You need to constantly be letting those execs know, okay, just so you know, the next couple weeks, hurricane season, we're going to expect some pretty big threats coming at us. Just want you to recognize and be aware of that. Or, hey, it looks like for the next week or two, it's going to be partly cloudy. Right? There'll be a couple things, but not a lot going on there. But you need to constantly make them aware of those threats at a high level, business level, so they understand and recognize what's happening. Because just check this out. Check this out for a second. If you never, ever have that conversation and they don't understand threats, they don't understand the analogy that you're a weather person, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, you come to them or you send an email or you show up at a meeting and you go, we need to spend $1 million because there are new vectors of attack that could cause significant harm to the company. You're like, what are you talking about? We haven't had any attacks. We're fine. There's no, because you did it out of context. It doesn't make any sense to them. They're like, why out of the blue are you doing this? But if every week or every few days you're swinging by and you're saying, hey, just wanted to give you a quick 45-second update on what sort of the threat vectors out there for our type of business, just sort of giving you a heads up and letting you know where things are headed and going, and you sort of continue that, then when you get into hurricane season, they're ready. They recognize, they understand. So a world-class CISO continually communicates the threat vector and the threat landscape, just like a weather person does, so they can understand and know what's happening or what can occur. Then, second critical part. What's the second part of risk? Risk equals threats times, you guessed it, I just said it, vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities are weaknesses or exposures in your organization that allows a threat to manifest itself. Your organization is always changing. There's always new systems being updated, new software being rolled out. I have yet to find, and if you are one of those, please let me know. I have yet to find an organization where their entire technology environment is static for more than even 2 weeks. Some of them are static even for 2 hours. But I'm being nice here. But I doubt you have any organization where 0 updates and 0 changes are being made over months, years, or decades. That's not how technology works. It's always being updated and changed, which means there's always new vulnerabilities. So now, in addition to being the weather person, you also need to make them aware. Hey, I'm sure you know, but we're rolling out a brand new customer management system this week. And you realize this is a brand new system that we developed in-house. And while we did the best testing we could, because of time constraints, it wasn't thoroughly tested. So there is a guarantee that there's going to be vulnerabilities discovered. So we're basically going into hurricane season and we have some leaky windows. We have some windows here that might not withstand 30-degree winds. I'm just giving you heads up here. And that's the type of interaction and communication that world-class CISOs need to have. Now, what does a world-class do? They correlate all of it. So they correlate the threats and the vulnerabilities and all those factors, and they basically just come back with, just want you to recognize that there is the potential that some of our customer data could potentially get compromised or breached. Right now, we're at about a 70% chance of that occurring. And if it occurs, it'll cost us about $5 million. And we probably need to spend right now today about $500K to fix that. That's sort of borderline, right, on a business, whether you accept that risk or manage it or you actually reduce it, right? 70 is sort of borderline there depending on the type of organization. But your other execs need to know that. That shouldn't be a piece of data that the CISO holds on to and is a secret. So you need to have that conversation. The other executives need to know that's the case. And then here's your weekly conversation. We were able to put some measures in place that really didn't cost much using what we have. And just so you know, we were able to get that down to about a 60%. Or some changes happened in the environment. Some new vulnerabilities are out there. And now I just want to let you know it's probably closer to an 80% chance that this attack could happen that would cost us $5 million. And I ran some numbers, I did some things, and I think we can get it reduced to an acceptable level for $350K. I think we're getting close where we probably want to fix it, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. I just wanted you to be aware of that. And most likely in that conversation, if you are communicating on a regular basis with them, it's going to be one of two things. Okay, Eric, thank you. Let's go ahead and fix it. Or Eric, thank you. I think we're close. Let's see if we can get it down, because remember, it was 70, then it was 65, then it was 70, then it was 60, then it was 70, then it was 75. Let's see what happens, because there's variability there. But if it gets above 85, let's pull the trigger. but you're in regular comms with them. And this is the other biggest thing I educate executives and cyber on. It's not a fixed budget. Yes, certain areas like marketing, you give them a set budget for the year. Might be some changes, but it's pretty set. IT, set budget for the year. But if you look at legal, you look at risk and compliance in those, there's not set budgets, right? Because there's a lot of variability in what happens. So you need to understand, go, listen, you'll give us a budget for the year that's going to cover the core foundational things. But depending on what happens with threats and what the rest of the organization does with vulnerabilities, there could be a variable of 1 to 3 mil, right, depending on the size. When I worked for super large companies, defense contractors, we would say, listen, there could be a variable here of 10 to 40 mil. And just wanted you to realize, because this isn't a static problem. I cannot predict for the next 12 days, let alone 12 months, what's going to happen in cyber. And therefore, give us a set budget, but realize there's variation. There needs to be some variable, just like you do with legal and just like you do with risk and compliance, where things could change over the year that are going to drastically modify or alter the budget that we need. And cybersecurity is the same way. But you can only have those discussions if we recognize that cybersecurity is a business function. And what I end up doing when I have these discussions is it changes everything. Because if you're thinking cybersecurity is a technical problem, you get a fixed budget, and you meet with the execs once or twice a year, you're going to struggle. My friends, there's no possible way you're going to be world class if that's the game you're playing. It's the wrong game. You're going out thinking we're playing American soccer, but the reality is you're on a rugby field. You're going to get bloody, because in American soccer, you can't tackle the dudes. You can't have 15 people pile up on you. In rugby, you can, right? So if you're playing the wrong sport and you're showing up with the wrong gear, it's not going to end well. So remember, biggest takeaway, cybersecurity is not a technical problem like IT. It's a business problem. Cybersecurity is a function of the business, which means you must be talking and communicating with the execs on a regular basis, updating them on the overall risk. Because the risks are changing. The threats are changing and the vulnerabilities are changing. Therefore, we need to continually give updates to those executives. Now, if this is not how you operated, it's going to take a shift, right? You're shifting the mode. I mean, it's going to take potentially months for this to happen, but you need to start the dialogue. You need to start the conversation, and you need to start explaining that the way we have done security is not working, which I think everyone agrees with. Let me explain why, and I think the explanation makes a lot of sense to executives, and let me give you the solution or the path forward. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Life of a CISO, where we talked about cybersecurity being a business function, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode.